Welcome to Early, the podcast about business in Web3 from Bankless Consulting. I'm your host, DSide, and on each episode of Early, I'm joined by thought leaders, innovators, and other denizens of Web3 who are building the internet of the future. Money is programmable, assets are digital, and exchanges are decentralized here. So join me on this journey into the past, the present, and the future of Web3. And remember, if you're here, you're early. Our special guest for today is a Bankless Consulting contributor. She is Mariette Clardy-Davis. She goes by AriesLaw. And hello, AriesLaw. Hello, Mariette.
Hello, hello.
Hey. So I'm going to give a quick intro on you. You are, as we know, a lawyer and a mental health speaker and advocate. Mariette is a graduate of Atlanta's John Marshall Law School after obtaining her BA in music with a concentration in classic voice. I want to know more about that, of course. And her master's in arts administration. She's a dancer, including ballroom and salsa, and an orator since childhood. Mariette is a board member of NAMI Central Georgia and a member of the Atlanta Blockchain Center and DAO. Also, Black Women Blockchain, tough one to say, Black Women Blockchain. She is a SheFi Fellow, a member of the Third Academy Metaverse Foundation, and an invaluable contributor to Bankless Consulting. She recently spoke at a conference on the FTX Cryptocurrency Scandal. Bankruptcy, Class Action Lawsuits, and Bombshells was the title. Mariette is an emerging leader in the DeFi, crypto, and Web3 legal advisory space. She's an entrepreneurial and creative professional leader who thrives in challenging and complex situations. And I can vouch for that. Mariette, you've been extremely helpful to me in your time here at BC. Welcome.
Thank you. And I am now an associate. That's right, DeFi. Put some respect on it.
That's right. An associate at Bankless Consulting. So welcome. Glad you can make it. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dive in.
That's great. You recently did some great work for me on some legal documents. I really appreciate it. You know, some of the things in this space are, I guess I want to hear from you. It's not the same as law outside of Web3. And what have you found to be the differences? Just to get right into that.
I think some of the big differences is really the grayness of some of the areas, because a lot of the projects or innovations are new. In a lot of other industries, there is a framework, whether it's regulatory, product-based, risk-based framework that people use to kind of set the foundation and provide counsel. And in this area, it's a bit different because there's so many new novel things. You're asked to provide counsel kind of in a different way. And I really think the biggest challenge is you are giving counsel in a space where there is a big push to scale fast and grow. So that becomes a challenge.
Yeah. Why is that? Is it just because of the urgency and the fast-moving environment, or is it because of the fact that there's no precedent for a lot of things?
I think it's both. There was that saying, I think it's like you can get it good and fast. No, you can get it fast. What is that saying? Like fast, but
I'm gonna
not
let you
good.
Say it.
Good, but not. Anyway, the point is a lot of people want to scale fast. And I think that that's a tech trait anyway. But a lot of companies who have scaled fast have to do that risk-based analysis. And then when you add to that the innovation going on in the space with a lot of the gray areas, it kind of compounds that. So you can grow fast as long as you have that risk. You're taking risk-based approaches to it. And we can talk about that later. But taking those risk-based approaches helps you to really determine how much, as a company, how much risk you want to take now versus what you're willing to take in the future.
Sure. So are there some common legal challenges that you see for builders in Web3?
So I think a couple of the big ones that I see are, really determining what the regulatory framework is, if something is a security or not a security, if something is being properly disclosed to whatever audience is, their target audience. Are the disclosures proper? Does the company have a workflow, not just a marketing workflow or a product delivery workflow, but a risk management workflow to collect the information that they need to collect to kind of satisfy themselves from a risk-based standpoint and potentially regulatory standpoint? And then really just overall, I think how firms approach legal and compliance challenges. Do they have a culture of risk management and compliance and legal? Or is that kind of on the back burner? Or are they making a risk-based decision to grow and scale quickly first and then bring in a legal team?
Yeah. So what have you seen more of? I mean, we all know about some of the scandals, and I'll ask you about FTX in a minute. Which is, and well, what have you seen? How have you seen that playing out in Web3? And what do you like? What's your approach when you walk into a high risk environment where you feel uncomfortable with the way things are operating?
So I think the first question specifically with FTX, I think that whether it was FTX or Luna, I think that it puts a target on the industry of Web3. There was already, I think, regulatory scrutiny, and in many cases it was due to lack of understanding. But a lot of these events really, unfortunately, showed that in some cases that certain services or companies take advantage of retail investors. And that's important because oftentimes governments and regulatory bodies want to protect retail investors versus like large institutions who can do their own due diligence. And so you have those challenges of bad actors coming into the space. And I always say this, I think I've said this before. Unfortunately, it's not a Web3 thing. If you have a bad actor, they would probably try and do the same thing in another industry or another space. Generally, bad people are bad or shady people are shady, no matter where you go. But I think the key is certain industries have frameworks around them to make it a little bit more difficult, not impossible, because the traditional space has these same bad actors as well, but they have certain frameworks set up that this space does not have forced upon them. I'm going to use that word, forced upon them. So firms could do it or not do it. And really, I think FTX and Luna aren't indicative of many of the companies in Web3, but unfortunately, the loudest voice in the room, sometimes when you're the newest voice in the room, whoever is the loudest is the one people hear the most. So even if 90% of the projects are doing great, protecting investors doing well, you have that 10% that are the loudest. And unfortunately, that's who people are looking at when they see a representation of the space.
Sure. And, we could definitely argue, I think people within the web who actually operate and live in Web3 understand the difference that most of the scandals that have happened have been on centralized exchanges, which are essentially bridges or pathways to Web3. But of course, they're dabbling in this unregulated area of the finance of finance. So that's because it is crypto and it's not fiat dollars, so that's why they can get away with it. But point is, I think in Web3 operations, there's a lot less of that going on, and we kind of self-regulate, at least to some extent. How do you see that playing out? And is it going to require legal regulation for activity in Web3 to remain above board?
I think that there will be some regulation. I'm a true believer in smart regulation made by people who understand the space, which then becomes a big issue because you have a lot of the people making decisions who don't necessarily understand it. But I think self-regulation can work if you have a community that can do the work. Unfortunately, when you deal with a centralized exchange or even just a centralized protocol, and you have the bad actors at the top, then the self-regulation often fails, because if the people that are the ones that are making the decisions in a centralized structure are not the ones doing the right things, then it trickles down within an organization. I think for protocols that are more decentralized and ones that are maybe DAO based, or just that structure where it's not necessarily a centralized structure, again, I think it can be done. But I think the most important thing is, in order to self-regulate, you have to understand what are the risks, not only to the business, but what are the risks to your client base. And without people in their framework that have that awareness and that knowledge, it makes it a lot more difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Have you let's see, and so have you dealt with much of this in your work at BC so far? Anything related to regulation, anything related to, I guess, sort of like the legal side of Web3 that, well, I guess regulation. Let's go there first.
So I would say in BC, no, thankfully, because a lot of what I do is
More
really
client related.
Yes, protecting the business. So
Right.
I actually enjoyed that part better. You do get to bring that risk analysis lens, but it's not like you're doing securities work for a firm. So a lot of my practice, which I think is also an important element for many companies, is having counsel to help understand the business risks, not just regulatory, because I think one of the unfortunate things about whether it's FTX or Luna or just this environment in general is that it's become heavily regulatory. What are we doing about regulation? It are things of security, but there are other things that need to be thought of that attorneys and counsel do outside of all of that. And so a lot of that is what I'm actually passionate about and what I do at Bankless. So it's about representing, the organization and looking at and out for the best interest of the company.
Right. Playing a little defense for us.
Yes.
I appreciate that. So why we had a conversation the other day, and we were talking about how people from non-traditional backgrounds need to be in this space. And you're a member of several organizations that might be considered non-traditional backgrounds for tech, for Web3 in particular. Tell us a little bit about those organizations and what you meant by non-traditional backgrounds need to be in the space.
I think, especially when it comes to people who come from maybe non-traditional backgrounds, or who are professionals that may have a part of them that's non-traditional, I think it's important that we bring that diversity into the space. So when you're building product and building services, if the builders look like you, think like you, have the same goals, same background as you, at times it makes it difficult to build an innovative product that appeals to a mass audience, if that's what you're going for, or mass adoption. So having that diverse lens by bringing people, not just race and gender and economic status, but diversity of thought. So there are a lot of very bright, intelligent people that have that creative, artistic background coming into this space and adding that lens of innovation on top of those that are purely analytical and purely technical, I think really makes this space pop and makes it unique versus just a pure tech stack type world.
Sure. Have you seen the effects of that? Like what in what way?
I think I have personally, just in the communities. There's a lot of diversity of thought, diversity of background, And again, there's nothing wrong with having a technical or analytical background. I think both are needed, but I'm seeing in a lot more spaces where you have people coming from different backgrounds, whether it's traditional or creative or even athletic, or, bringing their whole selves into a project and really coming up with some great use cases. So a
Sure.
lot of the organizations that I'm in, SheFi, with Maggie Love as an example of one of those, she really saw a need to create kind of a structured path for women and those of that identify as non-binary, and kind of create this structured learning path. You may be an expert in NFTs, but you may be a beginner, let's say, in DeFi. So being able to bring a community along, no matter at what stage, together in a way that gives a safe space, that creates opportunities to learn by doing, that allows people to ask, questions that they may not ask on just a general Discord channel, I think really is a way to increase not only mass adoption, but to help people establish who they are in this space and have a voice that really gives impact to making this space successful.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think we all have sort of a vision of the future where Web3 will permeate everything, all aspects of our lives. I personally come from the healthcare space. Spent 25 years as a physical therapist and a business owner, and brought that here. And I think I've been told by a few people that first of all, I don't understand certain conversations. Like, they're definitely out of my realm of knowledge. But I've been told by many people that I bring a unique perspective to a conversation, or to a challenge, or a project. So I obviously don't see. I see things the way I see them. It doesn't seem different to me, but I understand how that can be. And I guess I have seen how it's been valuable in my experience, particularly just as a general business owner. Um, a lot of people think of crypto and Web3 as all about money and everyone's business people, but it's really not. It's really not. People bring their unique skills. Um, you have a background in mental health advocacy and speaking and counseling. Can you tell me about it?
So yes, counseling, not mental health counseling. So I'm not a psychiatrist or doctor. I don't play one on TV, not yet.
Okay.
But I came from when I was 21, I was diagnosed with bipolar depression. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's really someone who has episodes like severe anxiety. I personally had headaches, body aches, insomnia, where you deal with very long periods of depression, and your highs or kind of manic episodes really appear. And for me, they appeared as someone who does like 10 different projects and does all of these things and then just crashes and burns out. And so I spent a lot of my life kind of going through that cycle. And when I got to a certain point where I was able to get to a point where I was able to establish stability and maintain that and kind of create something that worked for me, I realized that there were a number of professionals who struggled with that, whether in the legal community or just professional community in general. And so I started sharing my story, and that story resonated with a lot of people. And then I started, teaching, training, and then adding my legal background of mental health representation and employment law to that, to really kind of create that package where I could not only talk about my personal experience, but also legal challenges. And then moving into this space, there are so many, this space is a unique space because it's global, it's on 24 hours a day. And so some of the same things that I was dealing with, years ago, there were a number of people that I connected with on Discord that were dealing with extreme burnout. And I think because people are passionate, super passionate about the space, they often don't recognize what their boundaries are physically mentally and emotionally, and they just get to a point where they have nothing left and they're running on fumes and they're no value to themselves or anyone else. And so I started kind of shifting my voice into this space and just recognizing that, mental health and wellness is really a big deal here that isn't really spoken about as much, but it affects so many people that I have come into contact with in the Web3 space.
Yeah. Do you have plans to run with that in any way?
So 2023, I will be ramping up doing more speaking and training and looking at how to incorporate Web3 and wellness talks to either conferences or just, using my voice more in the space. Because similar to when I first started using my voice, I think here, a lot of people don't talk about it. And so when I do tell people, that was my diagnosis and here are the things that happen and kind of here is my journey, I think it's especially in this space, you don't really hear a lot of people use their voice in that way.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely easier to hide here, just because everything's remote, and you don't necessarily have to be on video, so you don't have to put on a happy face at all times. Just put your nose down, keep working, and that can make things worse for a lot of people.
Yes, and I think, like I said, the space is unique because people are truly passionate about what they do. So it's
True.
not like you're at a drudgery job that you hate and you're dealing with all of this. You really do love what you do. So a lot of people are torn with that.
Yeah. DeFi Beach wrote a question.
Yes.
Wait. His question is, what can we add to our space to add safety? He was referring to regulation, but I'm going to ask it in terms of mental health.
Oh,
What can we
okay. I
do?
was gonna.
So
I
besides
can answer
talking more,
both.
you can
Okay.
answer both. Let's do mental health first,
Okay.
because
So,
I think it's important. Like, can we and even an organization like Bankless Consulting, are there ideas that we can offer our contributors? We're not going to do counseling. We're not going to offer professional help, but what sort of either ground rules can we set, or what sort of um, uh, areas can we make life mentally safer for people?
I think the biggest thing really is giving people knowledge and education, because when you do that, when you give someone knowledge through potential tools, and it doesn't have to be therapy, it gives them a wider range of choices. So really explaining to people kind of what that is and making sure that it resonates with them, doing potential, whether it's workshops or providing information on best practices or things that people can do that it doesn't take away from the work. So how to set healthy boundaries, how to communicate those boundaries to others, how to set up your Discord so that you're not getting pinged at all hours of the night. That took me a long time to figure out, and most people don't have that together. Like, how do you create a technical, like within Discord and within all of that, how do you kind of create an environment that works for you? Some people are great with being on 50 channels, other people can only deal with 5. I think it's about them understanding what are some of the big challenges. So Discords and that whole world and universe often is a big one. Not understanding what healthy boundaries are. And again, it's what works for them so that they can figure that part out. How to properly communicate, how to even do certain things like how to set, execution goals. So if you have 10 projects, how do you properly manage yourself so that you can get them done? And it's not about telling people what to do, but just giving people tools that other people may have used that have helped them so that they can say to themselves, oh, wow, I've never even thought of that. Let me try that.
Yeah, great idea.
And then on the safety side, DSide, what can we add to our space to add safety? Same thing. I really think it's about education. So when I got in this space, I was lucky. I came from a traditional financial service background with compliance, So I was used to privacy, cybersecurity training, phishing, all that whole thing is, especially in the regulatory landscape, there is training that is required for licensed professionals, and it happens there too. So we'll start off with that. They are not immune from it. But I think when you are moving to this space and you're moving to who your target is, especially if they are less sophisticated, it's really starting at the base level. You would be surprised how many people click on phishing links that you wouldn't dare to, you'd be like, that's a scam. But people are like, really? That? So it really is not assuming that people have that base level understanding and meeting people where they are, even if it's at the very beginning, because I think everyone is on different spectrums when it comes to safety. So I would say the one thing is education. And then number two, creating within the companies programs that really help with privacy and cybersecurity and protecting their client base, whether that is looking at doing cyber audits within their company and their organization to see where are the points of vulnerabilities, whether it's a wallet or a bridge or the infrastructure itself, where are the vulnerabilities within the organization that can put their client base at risk. And then also making sure that you audit that too, once you are aware of that and you build a program, that you also audit your program so that things aren't falling through the cracks.
Yeah. A lot of what you spoke to a bunch of things. One is internal auditing, internal safety, internal education. I'm of the belief that we're not going to have mass adoption into the space until user interfaces are safer, and basically the consumer environment, or the average person's experience in Web3 is much safer.
Correct.
Yeah. So and that's just me sort of looking towards the future. And I know you have an entrepreneurial mind and you're always thinking of new ideas. What do you see on the legal landscape? What's on the horizon for Web3?
I would say more regulation. I'll start with that. It's coming. Now, it's
when you say regulation, I get goosebumps. Like honestly, that kind of sucks. Like, how is that going to make it not suck?
Well, it depends on who's making the regulation and what that is. Right now, if you're in the US, there's a lot of infighting on who gets the baby. So when they're done fighting, then maybe we'll figure that out. But I think worldwide, it's really the difficulty really is because it's a worldwide baby. And so it's not the US's baby or the UK's baby or Nigeria's baby or Italy's baby. And so it's difficult to have that worldwide regulatory approach. But I think different countries are trying. Also, I think what will be on the horizon is as companies grow and start scaling, they will hopefully be bringing in a general counsel or at least a attorney into the company to help establish and look at the legal frameworks for the company and kind of be that legal lens with the rest of the company as they build and grow. So what I see is as more companies grow during this period, because people build in dark times, that there will be more in-house counsel coming in because they can afford it. And once they, are done building and they're ready to launch, and then also they respect that there has to be kind of that risk versus reward. I will say a great example that an attorney brought up, I think during a panel, was Zoom. So Zoom, although they're not a Web3 company, they started if you've been on Zoom for a while, they did not have safeguards. You could just click on the link. They didn't have passcodes, depending on how far back you were.
Sure.
With Zoom.
I mean, I remember the beginning of the pandemic when people were just like walking in on classrooms full of kids and meetings because their companies did not have safeguards up.
Now,
on the Zoom calls.
Before the pandemic, a lot of people were using Zoom. So I think this is important. Like Zoom
Sure.
was used. They
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
have those safeguards in place. They, as a business, chose not to do that, whether they had attorneys or not. But they focused and prioritized on scaling fast. And the pandemic helped them scale fast. Even before that, people were still using it. Unfortunately, what the pandemic did is they scaled so fast that they also became the target of, whether you're in Web3, whatever, hacks and, people coming in. And their prioritization of scaling came at their detriment because they were now so big and they had a target that people went after them. But so did the regulators. So the regulators looked at them, and what saved them, and again, that's why I think it's important for businesses to look at Zoom potentially as an example. They had the money to pay the fine. So California, the state of California in the US
Sure.
went after them. I think it was like a $50 million fine. Someone else went after them. Lawsuits. They were able to pay it. Why? Because they scaled so fast,
Yeah.
and they were able to actually, make the money that they could pay the fines and then build the structure later. So
Sure.
some businesses don't obviously want to take that approach. For Zoom, that was a path that they took.
Yep. Yep. Just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat, and I can ask the question for you, or you can request to speak with Mariette yourself. What else besides regulation? What else is coming?
I think more partnerships. So more partnerships, strategic alliances. So one thing I really like about this space is that there are, I feel that there's a priority to partner with, whether it's other Web3 companies or have traditional companies partner with them. I know that like Unstoppable Domains does a lot of partnerships. They're a great example of that. And I think in this space, there will be a lot more of that. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm a huge connector. And so Web3 companies creating and building through creating partnerships and strategic alliances, I think will be big and will help not only to increase, the innovation in the space, but also to help grow the space.
What do you see as opportunities, or what kind of examples do you see as partnerships? Like, is it going to be DAOs merging or acquiring other DAOs, or do you see small, I guess, protocol developers getting bought out by larger tech companies? What do you think is going
I
to be
think
more prevalent?
there's going to be a little bit of both. There's always mergers and acquisitions in the space because as people grow, one of their key priorities might be acquisitions, because if you don't want to build it, you have to buy it. So a lot of people who are using that approach, once they get enough money, there will be acquisitions. One thing that I hope happens more, and I think it will, is traditional companies wanting to come in the space. So specifically, if you're a traditional brand or a traditional service organization, you may not want to double down and put tons of money in a Web3 project. But what you can do is partner with a Web3 company that maybe provides that service or provides an offering that your target client base might be interested in. And then being able to have that partnership or that strategic alliance with that Web3 company so that you don't have to build that division out yourself. So a lot of companies in many spaces have done that. They've partnered with, what was said, I think Disney partnered with, who does the animation? Disney, the Toy Story,
Like Marvel?
not Marvel, Toy Story,
Pixar.
Pixar. So Pixar was its own company.
Sure.
I see a lot of that happening, and they partnered with them initially before they acquired them eventually. But I do see a lot more of that in the space, especially with traditional companies who want to get in without having a lot of exposure within their company, having to pay to build that division out.
Yeah, I see that too. I think the big challenge there, or one of the big, I mean, in any sort of acquisition and even partnerships, there's often cultural challenges, cultural mismatches, or just full of roadblocks. And traditional companies coming to Web3 might it might be another level of cultural mismatch.
Agreed, but I think that there are ways to do it. There was a presentation I went to, and this Web3 company works with big brands, and I asked the question, how do you get these big brands to come on board? I mean, like big, like car company, major brands. And she said that what they do is they have within the companies, they have a small innovative team who wants to do more Web3, and they will work with that group. It could be like a team of 5 or whatever, and they create a proof of concept and they test it out multiple times to get the metrics that they need before they go to the bigger board with the data and the numbers. But I think you're spot on. I think with the strategic alliances, it's about understanding not only just the alliance itself, but also having a team to help the life cycle of the alliance, because the contract is just the first part. You have to be able to have the teams work together, or if it's not the whole company, like dedicated people on the team who understand the culture. The whole company doesn't have to, but you have to have that point person, that facilitator, and helps to manage the relationship. It's really, you need a relationship manager, someone who has the ability to understand both sides and to keep the deal going, or to understand that as the deal evolves, how to shift it and change it if they still want to work together.
Yeah. Legal question from the chat.
Yes.
DeFi Beats. You see it already. How much money do you need to be legally invincible?
It's whatever the market will bear. Or whatever.
What does that even mean?
Whatever the regulatory bodies say.
What does that mean? And what is DeFi Beats planning?
I don't know, but I mean, it really is whatever the market will bear, whatever the regulatory bodies feel like you can contribute. Obviously, if they feel like you have deeper pockets, ask Kim Kardashian. How about that? Why don't we start with that?
Is she legally invincible? I guess I was thinking of Donald.
I mean, she paid the fine. Obviously, it was a big fine, but I think it's a great example of
those pennies for her.
It could have been pennies, but it depends. Like if the regulators want to make a point.
Sure. All right. So it depends on the situation. Depends on the crime, I guess.
Yes. The more influence, the less money. Yes.
Influence is more powerful than money, according to Above Average Joe.
Yes.
True. Anything else you'd like to add, Mariette? This has been an amazing conversation. You're of course blowing me away. I know none of these things, so that's why I come to you. Anything else you want to add?
I would say the last thing, one of the reasons why I really enjoy working with Bankless Consulting, and I do, is that the key thing is I get to use talents and skill sets in a very different way. So yes, working on contracts and stuff like that, but I think I have the opportunity, which is one of the reasons why I think more people need to get in the space, to explore different talents and skills that I didn't even think I had. And so I think that Bankless Consulting, for me, allows me to do that, whether it's shadowing and on projects or just asking questions and sitting in on meetings. I think it's a great opportunity to know and really discover and explore different things that, different superpowers that you might have. I think Web3 does that for me in general. There have been a number of projects, whether inside or outside of Bankless Consulting, that I have done. And then I'm like, oh, that's easy. That's super easy. And people are like, what? It didn't take you 10 hours to do that. But I wouldn't have even thought that. And I think that this space really does allow you to figure out your superpowers, even ones that you didn't even realize you had.
That's great. Love it. All right, so I'm going to do a little review here. What did we learn today here with Mariette? We learned, one, you can build fast or you can build good, but it's very challenging to do both.
Oh, you did it. You got it.
Did I get it right? Thank you. It took me a minute. I wrote it twice.
Did you
but
have
I
to
got it.
Google it? Okay.
No, I didn't Google it. I
That's
actually
what I was gonna do.
I use my own brain.
Okay.
Um, we need to talk more about mental health and teach boundaries and tools in Web3. We learned that regulation is coming, but maybe it won't suck too much. I learned to partner before acquiring. I like that. And lastly, we learned that BC is a great place to learn and explore your superpowers. And I love that. Thank you. Excellent contribution. I appreciate you being here, Mariette.
Thank you for
Last
having me.
thing, yeah, cool. Last thing, please subscribe to the Bankless Consulting newsletter. That's at banklessconsulting.substack.com. Follow us on Twitter. That's at Bankless Consult. And if you are like us and have some chops, we want to meet you. If you need our services, we want to speak with you. Hopefully, this podcast has informed you a little bit about who we are and what we're doing to build the future of Web3. Thank you, Mariette. Let's do it again sometime. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Early, the podcast about business in Web3 from Bankless Consulting. We hope you learned about why and how we're building the internet of the future, where money is programmable, assets are digital, and exchanges are decentralized. Join me again next week on this journey into the past, the present, and the future of Web3. And remember, if you're here, you're early.